Hello, welcome to Miss Peepers Reading Corner. I'm Katrina, aka Miss Peepers. Let's talk about letter writing. Today we're talking about The Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky. The Perks of Being a Wallflower is number 3 on the list of the top 10 most banned and challenged books from last year. It is tied for the third spot with The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison, which we'll discuss in another video. In this book, Charlie, not his real name, is a teenager who starts writing letters to a stranger, describing his life, working through his emotions, and looking for an outlet to channel the fears that he has going into high school for the first time. Charlie is lonely. He's socially awkward. We never find out who he's actually writing to. So in some ways, there's this illusion that the reader is the recipient of these letters, that some teenager who knows who we are, but whom we've never met, is basically journaling and sending us journal entries. It's such an interesting way to create a novel that draws the reader in and makes you even more invested in the story than perhaps you would otherwise be. And it's a pretty engaging story to begin with. So who could ban such a thing? Like, seriously. Like many young adult novels, especially novels that center around teenagers, this book has sex in it. It also has LGBTQIA plus themes. There's drug use, there's profanity, which upsets censors a lot, and there's also some discussion about sexual assault, mental health, and trauma. So while this has a lot of dark topics in it, and there are definitely moments in the book that are incredibly heavy and heart-wrenching, it is ultimately hopeful. Charlie enters high school and he finds his people. He finds friends that he can connect to. He finds a social circle that before that he never even imagined he would. And it's not perfect. There are conflicts. Charlie makes mistakes. His friends make mistakes. But that's all part of being human, and particularly part of growing up and figuring out who you are and how you want to interact with the world. So why should you read this apart from the things that I've already said? This book is brutally honest. It's very well written. The voice feels very much like a teenager, but it doesn't feel like the author tried to talk down to his audience. It feels very natural. I think a lot of people will see themselves in Charlie. I know that I did to some extent, in that I too was the weird, lonely kid who wasn't good at social interactions. The comparisons sort of diverged from there, of course, but there were aspects of this book that felt familiar to me. And so that connected me to the characters even more. And I suspect that a lot of adults, especially adults who grew up to be avid readers, but I suspect that a lot of adults will see themselves in either Charlie or some of the other characters. This book was published in the late 90s and set in the early 90s, but I think a lot of what those teenagers are going through still exists today. On a macro level, those themes and those concerns and those worries and those joys and triumphs are, I think, in many ways universal to that teenage experience. But I could be wrong. I haven't been a teenager for quite some time. So if you are reading this as someone closer in age to Charlie and his friends, so that sort of like 15 to 17-year-old range, I'd be very curious to hear how relatable it is to a more modern audience of that same age. I also happen to have the 20th anniversary. You cannot read that. Here we go. I also happen to have the 20th anniversary edition of this book, which does have an additional letter in it from the original published work, in that you get a little bit of an update from Charlie as an adult, which I think is pretty cool. It's not strictly necessary, but it rounds out the story. And it is a bit of an author's note as well, which I think is pretty great to hear how the readers of this book have reached Stephen Chbosky himself after he published his book. So if, like me, you have been holding off on reading this book, stop. I wish I had read this sooner. I wish I had read this the moment it was released, but I didn't start hearing about this book a whole lot until maybe the last couple of years. I don't know why that is, if it's just the the literary circles that I walk in or what, but it's so powerful and I'm glad that I read it. So let me know, have you read The Perks of Being a Wallflower or anything else by Stephen Chbosky? I don't think he's written a whole lot in terms of novels, but he is a screenwriter according to his bio in the back. Let me know if you're familiar with any of his work and if you've read this and what you thought of it. And either way, whatever you do, please keep reading, and I'll see you in the next one.